Hello world, I'm Mandy Mundo and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Before I share with you my future travel videos, I thought it best to take a look at the past places I've visited, but also some of the great food that I've already eaten on my traveling journey. So if I had half a brain, I would have started this YouTube channel a few years ago because I've really done a lot of traveling these past couple of years, but alas, I didn't. So we'll have to just look at some still photos of some of my travels. And doing a lot of digging into my past, I realized that I have been to 31 states, 31 of the United States, and then also 28 different countries. So let's get started. First, I was born in California, born and raised in California. So a lot of our trips growing up were, in California, San Francisco, Southern California, Disneyland, but we also went to Hawaii a few times when I was a kid. And I actually found this picture of, I don't know if this was my first trip or my second trip to Hawaii. Let's take a look. Yep, that's me with a boogie board in the Pacific Ocean in Hawaii. I think I was about 7 or 8. So crazy, right? But I also spent part of my childhood in Illinois. So I've traveled a lot of the Midwest as well. And we would go back and forth between California and Illinois. And we'd also drive back and forth too. So I've driven a lot of state highways in the US. Also did some trips just throughout, either visiting family or visiting loved ones. So actually I found this one, it's pretty interesting. My first trip to Texas, before I even lived in Texas, was we went to see my brother graduate from the Air Force basic training. And of course we had to go and check out the Alamo. So that was when I was about 14. I also did live in Texas for a number of years as an adult. I did a little bit in Colorado and Washington, D.C. as well. And one of my pictures from Washington, D.C. was taking a look at the cherry blossoms. So there's me in front of the cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. Can't tell how pink they are, but they are very pretty. Other trips I've taken to in the States, I've been to Seattle and the upper Northwest region. I've also been to Disney World and Florida a couple of times, once as an adult, once as a teenager. I've been around the East Coast a lot as well. So in total, I counted 31 of the 50 states that I've been to. So a pretty good chunk, I think, for most Americans. I don't think they get to travel to that much. So I was a late bloomer when it came to international traveling. My first international trip actually was very basic. It was just going to Niagara Falls. So as a teenager, I think I was 14 in this picture. So here's me standing 1 foot in the United States and 1 foot in America, going to Niagara Falls. Or sorry, 1 foot in Canada and 1 foot in the United States. So pretty crazy, but that's my first international trip. I've actually never been to Mexico, even living in California, living in Texas. I've never been to Mexico, which is kind of funny. But I have been to Canada, I've been to Niagara Falls. So after that, I didn't do really a lot of international traveling until after we got married. So one of the first trips I took was, or actually the first trip after Niagara Falls, was I went to the Philippines. And I actually went there as a college student. I was there on kind of a nutrition mission trip. So part of it was working with the local population of school kids and assessing to see their hemoglobin status. So that's taking a look to see if they're iron deficient or anemic, and then measuring how tall they were and how much they weighed and comparing it to kids from other populations. But also I talked to the locals about nutrition, just basic nutrition, and we learned how to make cheese from goat's milk as well. So I have a couple pictures of that. So there's me in the Philippines with some goats. So this was again in college, my last year of college. And then this was me sticking the poor children in their fingers so I could test their blood and check for the hemoglobin. I'm sure they didn't like me much after that. Let's talk about the food. So the food when I was in the Philippines was awesome. Most of it, I don't know what I was eating because I was a guest at this kind of church / orphanage. So whatever they fed me was what I ate. And if we went to other people's houses, whatever they were cooking was what I ate. So a lot of times I didn't know what I was eating and I didn't care. It was awesome. And the Philippines was the first time I've ever seen banana trees. That was really cool. I used to have a picture of it. I can't find it. But I've never seen banana trees or bananas being grown. So that was really exciting. On my way back from the Philippines, I had a very long layover in South Korea. So I went on a little downtown tour of Seoul in South Korea, and I got to try some Korean food. So I definitely count that. I don't count just passing through an airport as traveling to a different country, but if I actually leave the airport and go and do an activity in the country, then I definitely count that. So my 8 hours in South Korea is one of the countries that I've been to. Afterwards, we didn't have like a honeymoon or a wedding ceremony, so once we could afford it, we decided to take a vacation and we went on a cruise. So we left Texas and went on a Caribbean cruise out of the Gulf of Mexico. One of the countries that we visited was Jamaica, and then the other one was Grand Cayman. We were supposed to stop in Mexico, but the wind was too high and they wouldn't let the boat dock. So as luck would have it, I lost my camera in Jamaica, so I don't have any other pictures from that trip except for this one on the cruise ship. That's the only picture I have of that trip, so the only evidence that I took that trip. And then once we settled down more after our travels and got up some more money saved, we took our next international trips were to St. Lucia. So we love the islands, the Caribbean, the tropical lifestyle. So we went back to St. Lucia. So much fun there. We stayed at a resort and we did some excursions while we were there. I also learned how to scuba dive while I was there. So I got my scuba certification in the Caribbean, which was pretty cool. So that was very exciting. The food at the resort obviously was delicious. But that was our next trip. After that, we decided to go across the oceans and go to Greece. So our first European trip was going to Greece, and we went to a little place called Sivota. And you've probably never heard of Sivota. I never heard of Sivota, but we found this trip that went there and the itinerary was already covered, so we just had to pay. And everything was taken care of for us. And honestly, it was one of the best trips that we've been on. And yes, the water is that blue. It is so insane. Had really good food there. One of the best Italian food I've had has been in Greece, which is kind of funny. And then we had those, the like fried zucchinis with the tzatziki sauce. We had those there that were pretty good. So that was basically our first trips together, and then when I was a child as well, before we moved to Europe. So afterwards, it was basically going to be a lot of traveling all at once we got over here to Germany. So the first trip that we took was just around Germany. You know, we went to Nuremberg and Bamberg, so just kind of rummaging around our local area. And then we decided to get really adventurous and go to Prague. So we went to Prague, the Czech Republic. I had this really, really good food in Czech, and I don't know what the dish is called. It's obviously a traditional Czech dish, but it's like these beef with these dumplings and this cranberry sauce and cream. It's amazing, absolutely amazing. So when I go back there, which I will eventually, I'm definitely going to get that again. When we were in Prague, we took a little day trip to the Kutná Hora village and got to see the famous bone church that's there. So that was really cool too. So our first trip once we were in Germany. After that, we went to Croatia and we drove from Germany to Croatia. Oh my goodness, it was a terrible drive. So we went in August when when a lot of Europeans travel, because that's when the kids are out of school. So it took us 12 hours to drive there and 14 hours to drive back, being stopped at the border for several hours just in passport control with the traffic backed up. But Croatia itself was awesome. We stayed at another resort there, so that out of the places that we've been to, I think is the best hotel food that we've had. I can't remember if it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or just breakfast and dinner. I think it was just breakfast and dinner, yeah, that the meals were provided, but it was the best buffet hotel food. Jeremy will tell you it's like the best pizza that he's ever had is that at that hotel in Croatia. So it was really, really special. One of my favorite trips that we did just there was getting out of the resort and actually going into the town in into the town of Šibenik. That's where we were, into the town of Šibenik, and then we went to the national park to see the waterfalls as well. So I like that best with my travels. I don't really like staying at the resort and sitting at the pool. Jeremy and I are the opposite with that, where he really just likes hanging out with a cocktail at the pool, but I really like to get away from the resort and go out and do some exploring. So Croatia was a good trip for that, for sure. After Croatia, we went to Vienna. In Vienna, it was over a long weekend, and it ended up raining like the whole time. But we still had fun. One of the best, again, foods I've had was at the little market. Oh, what's it called? It's like the big Marktplatz in Vienna, where it's just a bunch of food stalls. It's like so many food stalls, and then there was this little Italian restaurant inside the stalls, and we had some really good food there. After Austria, we went to the United Arab Emirates. So that was our first Middle Eastern country together. So that was exciting, and we went to Dubai and then took like a day trip to Abu Dhabi. So we were only there for 4 days, but in Dubai, you could literally spend 2 weeks there and still not do everything. It is huge. They have built it up so much, and they've built the biggest of everything. The biggest mall, largest garden that has the most flowers in it. The biggest tower. We went to the top of the world's tallest tower, the Burj Khalifa. So much that we packed in just those few days, which was exciting. And then on our day trip to Abu Dhabi, we went and visited the big famous mosque that's there. So beautiful. So not much to say about the food in Dubai, because it was a lot of cultures kind of coming together. There's a lot of, expats that moved to Dubai to work. So it's like a mesh of everything with the Middle Eastern influences as well. After Dubai and the United Arab Emirates, we went to Switzerland. So we went on a ski trip to Switzerland. And yes, the mountains, these pictures don't do the mountains justice, the Alps justice. That's literally just beautiful. In that time, that winter that we went, we also went to Austria a few times too, with some snowboarding. I snowboard on the easy slopes, and Jeremy does the really crazy stuff. I actually broke my arm that winter in Austria. So after Switzerland was one of our favorite trips, which was Morocco. So one of the reasons why it was our favorite trip, at least for me, was definitely the food that we had there. I think out of all the places that we've been to, Morocco was probably the best food. And probably because it wasn't just the food itself, but it was also the experience. So we did a lot of family style dining. That's how the restaurants were set up. They have a lot of vegetarian dishes as well. Now, I'm not a vegetarian myself, but I like vegetarian food a lot, so I really liked seeing that. And then from the nutrition perspective as well, I really liked seeing all the different colors and the different vegetables prepared in different ways, the eggplant, the peppers, and just seeing it all prepared in that setting. So I think out of all the trips, that's probably definitely up there with the best food that we've eaten. The food in Morocco, most of it is prepared in a dish like this. It's called a tagine. This is a display one, so you put some like salsa in it or some candy, but they have bigger ones where you actually cook it in these clay pots, and you cook the whole dish in there in the oven. So that's how it would come out to your table like this, and they'd go, oh, and there it is. A lot of couscous as well. So very, very, very good food in Morocco. After Morocco, we went to Poland. So we drove from Germany to Poland. We spent a few days there. We went to Warsaw and Krakow, and then also visited the camps at Auschwitz. So just a short trip, and then drove back. Jeremy had his, or we both had, I think, no, Jeremy had his first pierogies in Poland. But I think it was because we were in the town of Warsaw and in that very touristy area in the marketplace that they weren't very good. I worked with a lady from Poland, and her pierogies were better than the pierogies I had in Warsaw, unfortunately. So not the most tasty Polish experience that I had. After Poland, we actually went back to the United States because my sister got married, and while we were there, we went to Toronto just for like a little day trip. Jeremy wanted to see the hockey museum, so we just went there for a little bit, so I count that because again, we did an activity there. After Canada, what was next? Oh, so we did Romania and Bulgaria in like a combined trip. So we flew out to Romania, and then that is where we spent a couple nights in Bucharest. And I went and saw Bon Jovi in concert in Bucharest. And after that, I can honestly say I am never gonna go to a concert ever again that's not outdoors and where I'm not in the front row because it was amazing. I had never been to an outdoor concert like that before and never been that close before, and I say there is nothing better. So one of my best experiences was at that concert. After that, we actually took a bus from Bucharest into Bulgaria, and we stayed at a little resort town on the Black Sea. Romania and Bulgaria are very cheap. So this all-inclusive resort that we were at was actually very cheap. So had a lot of fun in Bulgaria. I like taking pictures of myself in front of different bodies of water, so I had to get a picture of myself in the Black Sea, different oceans that I'm in as well. So I definitely love doing that just to see the different, even though it all looks the same, but that I say, hey, yeah, that's me at this body of water. So I definitely do a lot of that. After Romania and Bulgaria, what was next? Well, it was still summer and my friend was getting married in Israel. So she lives in Israel and we went there to see her and attend her wedding. And of course, while we were there, I went and took a picture of myself in front of the Mediterranean Sea as well. So spent a couple nights in Jerusalem and a couple nights in Tel Aviv. So that was a good trip as well. I had the best falafel I've ever had in Israel, which is probably accurate. That's probably where you should have the best falafel is in Israel, in Jerusalem. So it was very, very tasty. After that, we were going straight from Israel to Singapore, but we connected in Ethiopia. And it was one of those where it was a long layover, so the airline paid for you to do a tour down in Addis Ababa. So again, I count Ethiopia as one of the countries I visited for that reason. So we got off the plane and we, along with a couple of passengers on our flight from Israel went and took this tour downtown Addis Ababa, and we went to a museum and we saw some Ethiopian artifacts. And so yes, I count that as one of my trips. They also gave us lunch. We had Ethiopian food, and that was Jeremy's first Ethiopian food was in Ethiopia. So can't do it any better than that. And of course, it was delicious. Obviously, I've had Ethiopian food before, but never in Ethiopia. So if you've never had it, it's usually a stewed meat and spices dish, and then you take bread and you use that as like kind of a clamping tool, and you grab the meat and you just eat it like that. So there's no utensils, you just use the bread as your utensil. So very, very tasty. And then we went to Singapore. So got back into the airport and went to Singapore, spent a few nights in Singapore, and went to one of those, again, outdoor markets that had different food stalls. So that was really good too. We also, my favorite part of Singapore was going to the gardens by the bay. And the pictures, again, just don't do it justice, especially at night when it's all lit up. It was awesome. That same night, we went and booked a reservation at one of the restaurants at that famous hotel, the Sands, Bay Sands Hotel. I'll remember the name of it later. But we went and ate at the tippy top of that hotel, and that was really good food. Very expensive dinner, but very, very good food. After Singapore, we went to Thailand. We went to Koh Tao, the island of Koh Tao. So that's the only part I've been to in Thailand. But while we were there, there's a lot of swimming and snorkeling and beach stuff. But we also did a Thai cooking class. So I learned how to make the spring rolls. And that was my first time ever making them, and they turned out awesome, I think. And then I made tom yum soup, which was really good as well. So as far as food experiences go, one of the best I've had is taking a cooking class in Thailand. And I think I'll probably do that a lot more often in the places I go to, because you really get to learn about the cuisine. And usually they'll give you the recipes to take home, so that way you can recreate it yourself. So loved my Thailand cooking experience. Okay, what's next? Thailand. Okay, after Thailand, we went to Slovenia. We first went to the Ljubljana town for a night, and then we went to Lake Bled for a couple of nights. We stayed on the lake, and that picturesque, absolutely picturesque, went hiking along up to the castle, and stayed in these like little cabins, these little glamping hut cabins on the lake. So that was a surprisingly sneaky good trip, as Jeremy would say. Did some horseback riding as well, so we really packed a lot into just a few days. Before I even moved to Europe, I probably didn't even hear of Slovenia, or definitely couldn't point it out on a map. So it's one of those things where it's like a hidden gem. So if you have the chance to go, definitely recommend going, especially to Lake Bled. After Slovenia, we went to Hungary. So we went to Budapest and spent a few nights there. I loved walking just along the bridges. So we did that. There was a museum there called the Museum for the Blind, and that was really cool because they take you around a room. You're in a dark room, but a blind tour guide is taking you around, and you have to feel for things and guess what things are. So again, another weird thing I never would have thought of doing. But I had one of the best soups I've ever had at a restaurant in Budapest. It was called the Zona restaurant, and it was like a bean soup. I think it had some ham in it too. Super good. It was one of those fancy things where they bring the bowl out to you, and then the guy has the soup actually in the pitcher and pours it over your bean and bacon or something, whatever's in the bowl. So if I ever go back to Budapest, I'm definitely going back to that restaurant and having that soup again. All right, after Hungary, we went to France. We went to specifically Paris, so that's all I've been to in France so far. We were there again over a long weekend, but we did as much as we could while we were there. So went to the Louvre, saw the Mona Lisa, and went to the Eiffel Tower, climbed down the steps of the Eiffel Tower, stood at top, took pictures obviously, and then we went to the Opera House and went and saw an opera. So lots of fun in Paris in just the few nights that we were there. It was very cold, so if we went back, hopefully we'd go back when the weather's a little nicer. So after France, we went to Ireland, and again, it was still winter, so it was still cold, but a lot of the fun things I did in Ireland was, again, any like excursions we did just out in nature. So we went and saw the cliffs of Moher. We stayed in this little Airbnb glamping hut, which was on a farm, an organic farm, and they prepared breakfast for us both mornings with their homemade bacon from their actual pigs. So that was some of the best food that I've had. And I had another good soup in Ireland when we stayed at a castle. I had this, what was it, parsnip soup. It was parsnip soup when we stayed at that castle in Ireland. So then went to Dublin for the last couple of nights. Obviously went to the Guinness factory. I tried my first Guinness at the Guinness factory, as you only should. So interesting food experiences in Ireland for sure. Also in Dublin, we went to this restaurant. It was called Boxty. Didn't know what Boxty was, but it's like a potato dish in Ireland, and you can put like different stuff on it or mix different stuff with it, and that was very good. So I would definitely recommend that. Okay, after Ireland, we went to Italy. We went on a ski trip in Italy, so went to the Dolomites and the what was it? The Celaranda. That's the area and the ski resort that we went to. So that was fun, just for like a quick ski trip weekend. And then after that was when COVID happened. So from then until now, we've only been on 3 other trips, really 2, because 2 countries were combined, 2 trips basically in the past year, which when I basically went to 20 countries in the 2 years before that, only 2 trips in the past year was very heartbreaking, but we made the most of it. So one of those trips was we drove to Belgium and the Netherlands, spent a couple nights in Brussels and Bruges, and while we were in Bruges, again, cooking classes, highly recommend them. We did a chocolate making class, and that was lots of fun. We got to take home our chocolates as well in this cute little box, and I got to share them with people. Very, very good. And then we drove up to Amsterdam and saw the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam. And then we also took a day trip to Texel Island, which is the first big island off the north of the Netherlands. And again, the weather was terrible, but I had to take a picture in front of the body of the water. So I definitely got one of those, like, yes, I was there, even though the weather was awful. And then the other trip that we took in the past year was going to Italy. Now, not just for the ski trip, but we actually went back and did more. So we went to Venice for a couple nights, and then we drove to the Tuscany Chianti region, did a cooking class in the Chianti region. So awesome. We made 3 different pastas, drank some really good wine, and again, I got the recipes to take home. So I've since tried to recreate those pastas, and I didn't do so good on the ravioli, but the other 2 pastas I was able to remake, and it was pretty tasty. But had brought back a lot of wine from that Italy trip, so we still have some that we have to drink. But again, highly recommend cooking classes. Not just if you're a dietitian or a nutrition enthusiast. No, highly recommend them for everyone. So much fun. Then we went to Lake Garda in Italy, spent a couple nights in Lake Garda. Stayed on that town Sirmione, which is on that little peninsula at the bottom of the lake. So that was good. Nice little like relaxing end to the trip, just sitting there. And of course, had to take a picture in front of the body of water. So that's it. In the past years of my life, that's where I've been. But like I said, upcoming, my next big trip is I'm going to the Maldives, and these will be the first videos I take of my trips from here on out. So sorry I didn't have much more to show you from these trips, these past ones, besides these still photos. But hopefully in the future, the videos will be much more exciting. So stay tuned for that, and thank you for watching. This is Mandy Mundo.